when three armed men stormed a luxury charter bus heading to Denver International Airport. The 32 passengers thought they were about to become victims of a violent crime. But they didn't know that quiet single father Julian Merroway, sitting in row 7 with his 8-year-old daughter's drawing tablet, had spent 12 years as a Navy SEAL combat specialist. In exactly 43 seconds, all 3 hijackers were subdued, the bus was secure, and Julian had returned to helping his daughter finish her homework as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Among the terrified passengers was Alessandra Corin, CEO of Meridian Industries, a billion-dollar tech company. She watched this unassuming man in a worn flannel shirt move with lethal precision to save everyone aboard. But what Alessandra did next when she discovered Julian's story 3 days later would change both their lives forever. This is the incredible true story of how one moment of heroism revealed the hidden struggles of a man who had sacrificed everything for his daughter, and how a powerful CEO's response proved that sometimes the most successful people understand what truly matters most. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The luxury charter bus hummed along Interstate 76, carrying 32 passengers through the Colorado mountains toward Denver International Airport. Most were business travelers heading to various destinations. Laptops open, phones pressed to ears, the usual symphony of corporate urgency filling the spacious vehicle. The October afternoon sun streamed through tinted windows, casting long shadows across the burgundy leather seats. In row 7, Julian Merroway sat quietly beside the window, occasionally glancing at his 8-year-old daughter Emma, who was absorbed in her drawing tablet, carefully sketching what appeared to be a family of horses. Her tongue stuck out slightly in concentration, a habit she'd inherited from her mother. Julian smiled softly, adjusting his worn flannel shirt and checking his watch. Their flight to Phoenix wasn't until evening, but Emma had insisted on arriving early to watch the planes take off. "Daddy, do horses dream about running?" Emma asked suddenly, looking up with bright green eyes that perfectly matched his own. "I think they dream about freedom," Julian replied, his voice gentle, "about open fields and wind in their manes." Emma nodded seriously and returned to her drawing, adding delicate details to the horses' flowing tails. The normalcy of the moment shattered in an instant. 3 men dressed in dark clothing and ski masks burst from the bus's bathroom at the rear, moving with coordinated precision toward the front. The largest one carried a sawed-off shotgun, while his companions brandished handguns. Passengers screamed, diving between seats as the lead hijacker shouted commands. "Everyone stay down. This is a robbery. Phones, wallets, jewelry, everything valuable goes in the bag." The bus driver, a 60-year-old veteran named Pete Morrison, kept his hands steady on the wheel, but his knuckles had gone white. "Please, don't hurt anyone," he called back. "I'll pull over wherever you want. Keep driving, old man." The shotgun-wielding leader barked, "We're not stopping until I say so." Panic rippled through the bus like wildfire. A woman in the front row began sobbing. A businessman in expensive suit frantically tried to hide his Rolex. 3 teenage students on a school trip huddled together in terror. Emma looked up at her father, confusion and fear clouding her young features. "Daddy, what's happening?" Julian's transformation was instantaneous and invisible to most observers. His posture didn't change dramatically, his expression remained calm, but something fundamental shifted in his eyes. The gentle father disappeared, replaced by someone who had been forged in the crucible of combat operations across 3 continents. "Emma, sweetie," he whispered, his voice steady and reassuring, "I need you to slide down in your seat and stay very quiet. Can you do that for me?" Emma nodded, immediately crouching low, her drawing tablet clutched against her chest. The hijackers were making their way down the aisle, collecting valuables with increasing aggression. The second gunman shoved an elderly woman roughly when she struggled to remove her wedding ring. The third kicked a fallen briefcase, scattering papers across the floor. "Move faster!" The leader shouted. "We don't have all day." That's when Julian made his move. He rose from his seat with fluid grace, appearing completely non-threatening as he stepped into the aisle. The nearest hijacker, the one who had just kicked the briefcase, barely registered him as a concern. Julian looked like every other passenger, scared, compliant, eager to avoid trouble. "Please," Julian said, his voice carrying just the right note of nervous submission. "My daughter, she's just a young girl. Don't frighten her any more than necessary." The hijacker sneered beneath his mask. "Sit down, hero, before you get hurt." Julian raised his hands in apparent surrender, taking one step closer. "Of course, What happened next unfolded in exactly 43 seconds. Though to the terrified passengers, it seemed to occur in both slow motion and lightning speed simultaneously. Julian's left hand shot out with surgical precision, striking the nearest gunman's wrist at the exact pressure point that would cause his fingers to release involuntarily. The weapon flew from nerveless fingers as Julian simultaneously pivoted, using the hijacker's own momentum to drive him face first into the nearest seat. Before the other two could fully process what was happening, Julian was already moving. His combat training had taught him that in close quarters, speed and unpredictability were everything. He kept low, using the bus seats as cover while closing distance with the efficiency of a predator. The second hijacker spun toward the commotion, raising his pistol, but Julian was already inside his effective range. A precise strike to the solar plexus doubled the man over, gasping for air, while Julian simultaneously disarmed him with a textbook wrist manipulation that would have impressed his old instructors at Coronado. The leader with the shotgun had the longest weapon, which made him the most dangerous but also the most vulnerable in the confined space. Julian feinted left, then dropped and rolled right, coming up directly beneath the man's guard. The shotgun's barrel passed harmlessly over his head as Julian drove his shoulder into the hijacker's midsection, lifting him off his feet and slamming him against the bus's reinforced wall. The shotgun clattered to the floor. Julian secured it with his left hand while using his right to apply a sleeper hold that dropped the leader into unconsciousness within seconds. When the violence ended, 3 zip ties from Julian's wallet secured the hijacker's hands behind their backs. All 3 weapons were safely cleared and secured. The most dangerous 43 seconds in the lives of 32 people had concluded with surgical precision and 0 casualties. The bus fell into stunned silence. Julian calmly returned to his seat, checking on Emma, who had remained exactly where he'd told her to stay. "It's over, sweetheart. Everyone's safe now." Emma looked up at him with wide eyes. "Daddy, how did you do that?" "Just some things I learned a long time ago," Julian replied softly, smoothing her hair. "Now, how about we finish that horse drawing?" As Emma returned to her tablet, seemingly accepting her father's extraordinary actions with the resilience of youth, the other passengers began to emerge from their shock. Whispers rippled through the bus. "Did you see how fast he moved? Where did he learn to fight like that? He took down 3 armed men like it was nothing. Who is that guy?" In the premium seats near the front, Alessandra Corrin slowly raised her head. As CEO of Meridian Industries, she was accustomed to high-pressure situations, boardroom battles, and corporate crises that could cost millions. But she had never witnessed anything like what had just occurred. She studied Julian's profile as he helped Emma with her drawing, noting the way he moved with unconscious precision, the controlled alertness in his posture even as he appeared completely relaxed. This was no ordinary passenger who had gotten lucky. This was someone with extensive combat training, someone who had faced life-and-death situations before. Pete Morrison, the bus driver, was already on his radio, reporting the incident to state police. This is Charter Bus 77 Alpha requesting immediate law enforcement assistance on Interstate 76. Mile marker 247. We've had an attempted hijacking, but the situation is secure. Suspects are detained. Repeat, situation is secure. Within minutes, the distinctive wail of police sirens could be heard in the distance. The bus pulled onto the shoulder as multiple Colorado State Police vehicles surrounded them, officers approaching with weapons drawn until Pete Morrison could explain that the threat had been neutralized by a passenger dot as the scene unfolded around them. Police taking statements, paramedics checking passengers for injuries, news crews arriving. Julian remained focused on Emma, shielding her from the chaos while quietly providing information to the investigating officers. Alessandra watched it all, her analytical mind processing every detail. She had built her company by recognizing exceptional talent when she saw it, and what she had just witnessed was exceptional in the extreme. More than that, she sensed there was a story here, something deeper than a chance encounter with a former soldier or police officer. The way Julian deflected attention from himself, the careful way he avoided giving specific details about his background, the protective bubble he maintained around his daughter, these were the actions of someone who had deliberately chosen anonymity, someone who preferred to remain unseen. As the bus finally resumed its journey toward Denver International Airport, now escorted by police vehicles, Alessandra found herself studying the quiet man in row 7 with growing curiosity. She had witnessed something extraordinary, but she sensed the real story was just beginning to unfold. Julian Merroway had just revealed himself to be far more than a simple passenger traveling with his daughter. The question was, who was he really? And what had brought someone with his obvious skills to this moment, this bus, this carefully constructed ordinary life? The answers, Alessandra would soon discover, would challenge everything she thought she knew about sacrifice, heroism, and what truly mattered in life. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window of the modest 2-bedroom apartment in Thornfield Heights, a working-class neighborhood in Aurora, Colorado. Julian Merroway stood at the counter, methodically packing Emma's lunch while she sat at their small dining table, carefully arranging her school supplies in her backpack. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Remember, you have our art class today, Julian said, slicing an apple into precise sections. Did you pack your special pencils? Emma held up a small case triumphantly. Got them. Mrs. Patterson said, we're going to learn about shading techniques today. She paused, studying her father's face. Daddy, why do you always cut my apples the same way? Julian glanced at the apple sections, each one exactly the same size and shape. It was a habit he developed during his military years, where precision and consistency weren't just preferences, they were survival skills. But he couldn't explain that to an 8-year-old. I guess I like things neat, he said with a smile. Adding the apple sections to her lunchbox alongside a turkey sandwich, string cheese, and a juice box. Make sure you get the same amount in each bite. Emma accepted this explanation with the easy logic of youth and returned to organizing her backpack. Julian watched her for a moment, marveling at how she had inherited Sarah's methodical nature along with her bright green eyes. His late wife had been a teacher, and Emma showed the same careful attention to detail that had made Sarah such an effective educator. The apartment around them reflected Julian's current life, functional, clean, but deliberately modest. The furniture was secondhand but well maintained. Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator and one wall of the living room, splashes of color in an otherwise neutral space. The only hints of Julian's past were carefully hidden. A few military books on a high shelf, a set of binoculars that he claimed were for bird watching, and a locked footlocker in his bedroom closet. To their neighbors, Julian was simply a single father who worked in IT support for a mid-sized logistics company downtown. He kept regular hours, participated in parent-teacher conferences, and could be seen every evening helping Emma with homework at their dining table. He was polite but private, friendly, but not particularly social. "Ready for school?" Julian asked, checking his watch. 7:15 a.m., exactly on schedule. "Ready," Emma announced, shouldering her backpack. They walked the 4 blocks to Thornfield Elementary together, a daily ritual that Julian treasured. Emma chattered about her upcoming science project on weather patterns, her friend Madison's birthday party next weekend, and her growing collection of horse figurines. Julian listened attentively, asking follow-up questions that showed he valued every detail of her world. The school crossing guard, Mrs. Rodriguez, waved at them as they approached. "Morning, Mr. Marroway. Emma, how's my favorite artist doing today? I'm going to draw horses in art class," Emma announced excitedly. "Horses again?" Mrs. Rodriguez laughed. "You're going to be the best horse artist in Colorado at this rate." As they reached the school entrance, Julian knelt to Emma's level for their daily goodbye ritual. "Have a wonderful day at school, sweetheart. Learn something amazing." Emma hugged him tightly. "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, kiddo. I'll be right here at 3 o'clock. Julian watched until Emma disappeared through the school doors, then began his walk to the bus stop for his commute downtown. This routine had been his anchor for the past 3 years, the normal life he had fought so hard to build after everything fell apart. His job at Integrated Solutions, Inc. was deliberately unremarkable. As a senior IT support specialist, he troubleshot network issues, updated security systems, and provided technical assistance to employees who struggled with everything from password resets to printer malfunctions. His colleagues knew him as reliable, competent, and remarkably calm under pressure, but none of them suspected that his composure came from years of making life-or-death decisions in hostile environments. "Morning, Julian," called Rebecca Martinez, the office manager, as he settled at his desk at precisely 8 a.m. "We've got a situation with the Denver branch's server. Think you can work your magic?" Julian nodded, already pulling up the diagnostic tools. "I'll have it resolved within the hour." And he would. Technical problems felt almost relaxing compared to the challenges he had faced in his previous life. There were clear solutions, logical steps to follow, and the worst-case scenario was usually just some lost data or a frustrated user. During his lunch break, Julian often found himself at the small park across from his office building, eating a sandwich while watching the people pass by. He had developed an unconscious habit of tactical observation, noting exits, assessing potential threats, tracking movement patterns, but he disguised it as casual people watching. Today, his phone buzzed with a text from Emma's school. "Art class was amazing. Drew a whole family of horses. Can't wait to show you." Julian smiled, saving the message. These small moments of Emma's joy were what made everything worthwhile. His phone rang. Rebecca again. "Julian, we've got an emergency. The client presentation system crashed, and the meeting starts in 20 minutes. Can you get over to the conference room?" "On my way," Julian replied, already gathering his tools. This was his world now. Predictable crises with manageable solutions, a steady paycheck that covered their modest needs, and the quiet satisfaction of being present for every important moment in Emma's life. He had traded the adrenaline and purpose of his former career for something infinitely more valuable: stability for his daughter. After work, Julian stopped at the local grocery store, following his usual efficiency-driven shopping routine. He had learned to meal prep like a military operation, planning a week's worth of dinners that Emma would actually eat while staying within their careful budget. "Mr. Marroway," called Angela Foster, who worked at the deli counter. "The usual for Emma's school lunch?" "Please," Julian replied. "And maybe some of those cookies she likes for her friend's birthday party." Angela smiled knowingly. "That girl of yours has good taste. How's she doing in school?" "Straight A's and happy," Julian said with obvious pride. Can't ask for more than that. As he walked through the store, Julian unconsciously maintained situational awareness, checking reflections in freezer doors, noting the locations of exits, keeping track of other shoppers' movements. These habits died hard, but he had learned to integrate them seamlessly into his civilian life. At exactly 2:50 p.m., Julian positioned himself outside Thornfield Elementary with the other waiting parents. He was always 10 minutes early, a precaution that had become routine. He scanned the crowd of parents, noting familiar faces and unconsciously cataloging anyone new or unusual. Emma burst through the school doors at 3:05, her face bright with excitement as she spotted him immediately. She ran to him with the unbridled enthusiasm that made every challenging day worthwhile. "Daddy, look what I made." She thrust a drawing at him. Indeed, a family of horses grazing in a meadow, rendered with impressive detail for an 8-year-old. "This is incredible, Emma," Julian said, studying the artwork seriously. "You've captured the way horses move, the way they relate to each other. This is real artistic talent." Emma beamed under his praise. "Mrs. Patterson said I have a natural eye for composition." "What's composition?" As they walked home, Julian explained artistic concepts in terms Emma could understand, drawing parallels between visual balance and the way she organized her room. He had become expert at turning every conversation into a learning opportunity, making up for the educational advantages he couldn't afford to provide. Their evening routine was as consistent as their morning ritual. Homework first, spread across the dining table while Julian prepared dinner. Emma worked on math problems while Julian chopped vegetables, both of them comfortable in each other's presence. Then dinner together, where Emma recounted every detail of her day while Julian listened with focused attention. "Madison's mom said she might take us to the Natural History Museum next weekend," Emma announced between bites of spaghetti. "Can I go? Can I go?" Julian considered the request carefully. He had learned to balance Emma's need for normal social experiences with his instinctive protective impulses. "I'll call Madison's mom to discuss the details, but if it sounds safe and fun, then yes." After dinner, bath time, and a chapter from their current book, they were working through the entire Chronicles of Narnia series. Julian tucked Emma into her bed, surrounded by her collection of stuffed horses and her latest artistic creations. "Daddy," Emma said as he was about to turn off the light, "why don't you have friends like the other parents?" The question caught Julian off guard. He sat on the edge of her bed, considering how to answer honestly without worrying her. "I guess I'm still figuring out how to make friends here," he said finally. "Moving to a new place means starting over with relationships, but I have you, and that makes me pretty lucky." Emma nodded, satisfied with this explanation. "Maybe someday you'll find a friend who likes horses as much as I do." After Emma fell asleep, Julian sat in their small living room, laptop open as he worked on a freelance web design project, extra income that would help fund Emma's art classes next semester. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. This was his reality: carefully budgeted finances, strategic planning for Emma's future, and the constant balancing act of providing stability while hiding the skills and experiences that could attract unwanted attention. He had chosen this ordinary life deliberately, trading excitement and purpose for the privilege of being Emma's full-time father. But sometimes, in moments like this, Julian found himself remembering a different version of himself, someone who had led teams through impossible situations, someone who had made decisions that affected international security, someone who had been part of something larger than himself. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now. Julian Marroway, single father and IT specialist, was who he needed to be. The man he had been before Sarah's death existed only in carefully locked away recollections and the muscle memory that had saved 32 lives on a charter bus. As he worked on the website code, Julian allowed himself one small luxury: imagining Emma's reaction when he could finally afford to enroll her in the advanced art program at the community college. Every sacrifice, every ordinary day, every careful choice was building toward her future. That future was all that mattered now. Call came at 0347 hours on a Tuesday morning in Kandahar province. Lieutenant Julian Marroway was already awake, as he always was 15 minutes before any scheduled communication, when his satellite phone buzzed with the priority signal that meant only one thing: emergency contact from home. "This is Marroway," he answered, stepping away from his sleeping teammates in the forward operating base. "Julian, this is Colonel Henderson from Peterson Air Force Base." The voice was carefully controlled, professional, but Julian could hear something underneath, the tone that meant his world was about to change forever. "Son, I need you to sit down." Julian remained standing, his grip tightening on the phone. "What's happened?" "It's Sarah, Julian. There's been an accident." The words that followed car accident, undiagnosed heart condition, instantaneous seemed to reach him through deep water, distorted and impossible to fully process. Sarah, his wife of 6 years, the elementary school teacher who sent him care packages filled with Emma's drawings and homemade cookies. Sarah, who had been perfectly healthy when he left for this deployment 8 months ago. "Emma?" he managed to ask. "She's physically unharmed. She was at school when it happened. She's staying with the Hendersons right now, but Julian, she's been asking for you constantly. She doesn't understand why Mommy won't wake up." Julian closed his eyes, and for the first time in his military career, felt completely unprepared for the mission ahead. Leading hostage rescue operations in hostile territory was nothing compared to explaining to a 5-year-old why her mother would never come home. "I need immediate leave," he said. "Already arranged. Transport leaves in 2 hours. You'll be home tomorrow evening." The flight back to Colorado Springs was the longest of Julian's life. Somewhere over the Atlantic, he made a decision that would reshape everything. He was done. Done with deployments. Done with missions that took him away from the only family he had left. Done with a career that had already cost him too much. Emma was asleep when he arrived at the Hendersons' house, curled around a stuffed horse that Sarah had bought her for her 4th birthday. She looked impossibly small in the guest bed, her face still showing traces of confused tears. When she woke up and saw him, she threw herself into his arms with desperate relief. "Daddy, I've been waiting and waiting. Mommy won't wake up, and Mrs. Henderson says she went to heaven, but I don't understand what that means." Julian held his daughter while she sobbed against his chest and felt something fundamental break inside him. Not just grief, though that was overwhelming, but the certainty that he could never again choose duty over being present for the most important person in his world. The next few weeks passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, legal paperwork, and the impossible task of helping Emma understand permanent loss. Julian's commanding officer, Captain Rodriguez, flew in from Virginia for the service. "Take all the time you need," Rodriguez told him after the funeral. "Your security clearance is solid, and there's a spot waiting for you with 7th Group. When you're ready, maybe we can even arrange stateside rotations for a while." Julian looked across the cemetery to where Emma stood holding Mrs. Henderson's hand, placing a drawing she had made on Sarah's grave. "I'm not coming back, Rodriguez. Julian, I understand you're grieving, but don't make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. You're one of the best operators I've ever worked with. The teams need you. Emma needs me more," Julian replied quietly. "She's 5 years old. She's lost her mother. I won't risk her losing her father too." Rodriguez studied his face carefully. "You're serious about this? Dead serious?" "I'll finish out my current commitment, but I'm not re-enlisting. I'm not taking any more deployments. I'm done." The decision cost Julian everything he had built over 12 years of service. His pension, his career trajectory, his brothers in arms, his sense of purpose, all sacrificed for the chance to be Emma's full-time parent. The transition was brutal. Julian discovered that many of his skills didn't translate to civilian employment. He was overqualified for entry-level positions and underqualified for management roles that required business experience rather than combat leadership. His background made employers nervous. They worried about PTSD, about stability, about whether someone trained to kill could adapt to corporate culture. He took a job in IT support because it was the first decent offer he received, using skills he had picked up during his military service managing communications equipment. The pay was less than a third of his military income, but it came with regular hours and the promise that he would never miss another important moment in Emma's life. The hardest part wasn't the financial struggle or the career adjustment, was the loss of purpose. For 12 years, Julian had been part of something larger than himself. He had protected American interests, rescued hostages, and made decisions that affected international security. His work had mattered on a global scale. Now his biggest challenges involved printer malfunctions and password resets. Emma, meanwhile, was struggling with her own adjustment. She had nightmares about car accidents, separation anxiety when Julian left for work, and a persistent fear that other people she loved might suddenly disappear. Julian learned to navigate parent-teacher conferences, playdates, and the complex social dynamics of elementary school, all while managing his own grief and the overwhelming responsibility of single parenthood. Mr. Marroway, Emma's first grade teacher, Mrs. Chun, told him during a conference 6 months after Sarah's death, "I'm concerned about Emma's social withdrawal. She's academically advanced, but she doesn't seem to connect with the other students. Has she talked to anyone about her mother's death?" Julian had looked into grief counseling, but their insurance didn't cover it, and he couldn't afford the out-of-pocket costs on his IT salary. Instead, he did his best to be Emma's counselor himself, reading parenting books late at night and trying to create stability through routine and constant presence. "She talks to me," he told Mrs. Chun. "We're working through it together." Mrs. Chun looked skeptical but didn't press the issue. Julian added, "Find affordable counseling for Emma," to his growing list of parental challenges he felt unprepared to handle. The financial pressure was constant. Even with careful budgeting, Julian struggled to cover rent, groceries, and Emma's basic needs on his reduced income. He took freelance web design projects in the evenings, teaching himself skills through online tutorials while Emma slept. The work was tedious compared to his former responsibilities, but every extra dollar went toward Emma's future art supplies, potential college savings, the security deposit for a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. His former teammates reached out occasionally, sharing updates from deployments Julian would never see, describing missions he would never undertake. Each conversation was a reminder of the life he had chosen to leave behind. "We're heading to Eastern Europe next month," his old friend Marcus told him during one call. "Could use your expertise on the planning phase, even if you can't come along." Julian watched Emma coloring at the dining table, her tongue poking out in concentration as she worked on a detailed drawing of their family. Just the two of them now, holding hands under a rainbow. "I'm not available," he said simply. "Julian, you can't just waste your training. There are ways to stay involved without full deployment schedules. Consulting work, training new recruits." "I'm exactly where I need to be," Julian interrupted gently. "Thanks for thinking of me, but this is my mission now." After he hung up, Emma looked up from her drawing. "Who was that, Daddy?" "An old friend." "From work," Julian replied. "How's your picture coming along?" "Good. I made us both happy because we're together." She held up the drawing proudly. "Mrs. Patterson says I should draw more people in my pictures, but I like drawing just us." Julian knelt beside her chair, studying the artwork seriously. "This is perfect, exactly as it is, sweetheart. Sometimes the most important pictures are the simple ones." That night, after Emma was asleep, Julian allowed himself a few minutes to process what he had given up. He had been part of an elite unit, trusted with the most sensitive operations, respected by colleagues who understood the weight of their shared responsibilities. He had been good at it, better than good. He had been exceptional. But as he checked on Emma one more time before bed, watching her sleep peacefully surrounded by her stuffed animals and artwork, Julian felt no regret. He had made the only choice that mattered. Emma would grow up knowing. Her father had chosen her over everything else: career, financial security, personal fulfillment, the respect of his peers. Some missions were more important than others. Some battles were won not through combat, but through the daily choice to show up, to be present, to put love before ambition. Julian Merroway, former Navy SEAL Team 6 operator, had found his most important assignment: raising Emma to be happy, secure, and confident in the knowledge that she was the center of someone's universe. Everything else, the financial struggles, the career sacrifices, the loss of his former identity, was just the price of success in the mission that mattered most. The man who had neutralized 3 armed hijackers in 43 seconds was the same man who now spent his evenings helping with second-grade math homework. The skills were different, but the dedication was exactly the same. Emma was his priority, his purpose, his reason for every choice he made. And unlike his military service, this mission would last a lifetime. Alessandra Corrine stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower in downtown Denver, watching the morning sun reflect off the Rocky Mountains in the distance. At 34, she was the youngest CEO in her company's 60-year history, having built Meridian Industries from a struggling mid-tier software company into a billion-dollar technology powerhouse specializing in cybersecurity and data analytics. The view from her office was spectacular, but Alessandra rarely noticed it anymore. Her attention was focused on the quarterly reports spread across her mahogany desk, each one representing millions of dollars in revenue and thousands of jobs under her responsibility. Meridian Industries employed over 8,000 people across 12 countries, and every decision she made rippled through countless lives. "Your 10 o'clock is here," announced Victoria Thames, her executive assistant, through the intercom. "The Phoenix development team is ready to present the new client. Interface designs." Alessandra straightened her charcoal gray blazer and gathered the reports. "Send them in." "And Victoria, confirm my flight to Phoenix this afternoon. I want to visit the satellite office before the quarterly board meeting." This was Alessandra's world. Back-to-back meetings, strategic decisions that affected global markets, and a schedule measured in minutes rather than hours. She had built her success on meticulous preparation, analytical thinking, and an intuitive understanding of both technology and human psychology that made her exceptionally effective at predicting market trends. But success had come at a price. Alessandra's personal life was virtually non-existent. She worked 70-hour weeks as a matter of routine, considered a vacation to be any weekend where she only checked email twice, and hadn't been on an actual date in over 18 months. Her penthouse apartment in Cherry Creek was immaculate, and underused. She often slept in her office rather than making the 20-minute drive home. The irony wasn't lost on her that she had become exactly what she had sworn she would never become. Her father, Richard Corrin, had been a successful investment banker who built his fortune by sacrificing everything personal for professional advancement. Alessandra had grown up in luxury but emotional poverty, raised primarily by nannies while her father traveled constantly for business. Her mother, Elena, had tried to compensate by being overly involved in Alessandra's academic achievements, turning every school project into a high-stakes performance review. "Excellence isn't negotiable, Alessandra," Elena would say during their nightly homework sessions. "Success requires sacrifice. Mediocrity is for other people." By age 12, Alessandra spoke 3 languages fluently, played competitive tennis, and maintained straight A's in advanced classes. By 16, she was already thinking 3 moves ahead in every situation, analyzing human behavior like chess pieces on a board. By 20, she had graduated summa cum laude from MIT with degrees in computer science and business administration. She had sworn she would be different from her parents, that she would build success without losing her humanity. Instead, she had simply become more efficient at emotional compartmentalization. The Phoenix presentation went well. Alessandra asked pointed questions that revealed both strategic insight and technical depth, approved the new interface designs with specific modification requests, and allocated additional resources for accelerated development. Her team left energized and focused, having experienced her trademark combination of high expectations and strong support. "Excellent work," she told the lead designer. "The user experience improvements will give us a significant competitive advantage. I want progress reports every 2 weeks until launch." After the meeting, Alessandra reviewed her schedule for the remainder of the day. Lunch with potential acquisition targets, a conference call with their European partners, final preparation for the Phoenix trip, and a working dinner with her senior leadership team. Somewhere in between, she would need to review the quarterly financial projections and prepare talking points for tomorrow's board presentation. It was a schedule that would exhaust most people. For Alessandra, it was energizing. She thrived on complexity, on the intellectual challenge of managing multiple high-stakes situations simultaneously. Meridian Industries was her creation, her child, and she protected it with fierce dedication. The irony was that she had built a company known for innovation in human-centered design while becoming increasingly disconnected from her own humanity. At 2:30 p.m., Alessandra's driver collected her from Meridian Tower for the trip to Denver International Airport. She preferred charter services for business travel, more efficient than commercial flights, more productive than her own jet, and flexible enough to accommodate her unpredictable schedule. She settled into her preferred seat on the luxury charter bus, laptop open, phone headset in place, already conducting her first conference call of the journey. The bus was comfortable and equipped with high-speed internet, allowing her to maintain productivity during the 3-hour journey to Phoenix. Alessandra barely noticed the other passengers boarding. Her world had contracted to the screen in front of her, the voice in her earpiece, and the strategic decisions that required her immediate attention. She was negotiating a complex partnership agreement with a Japanese cybersecurity firm when the first hijacker emerged from the bus bathroom. The initial shock of seeing masked men with weapons was unlike anything in Alessandra's experience. Her world was one of calculated risks, contractual negotiations, and competitive but ultimately civilized business warfare. Physical violence was something that happened to other people, in other circumstances, far removed from her carefully controlled environment. Her first instinct was analytical: assess the situation, identify variables, develop response strategies. But as the reality of immediate physical danger penetrated her executive mindset, she experienced something she hadn't felt since childhood: complete helplessness. Alessandra had built her success on being the smartest person in any room, on having more information and better analysis than her competitors. But intelligence and preparation meant nothing against men with guns who operated outside the rules of her structured world. When the quiet man in row 7 rose from his seat, Alessandra initially dismissed him as another terrified passenger trying to negotiate with the hijackers. But something in his posture, in the controlled way he moved, triggered her pattern recognition skills. This wasn't random panic. This was strategic action. What she witnessed over the next 43 seconds challenged every assumption she had made about heroism, about competence, and about the kinds of people who were capable of extraordinary action under pressure. Julian Marroway moved with the precision she associated with elite professional performance, but applied to physical combat rather than boardroom negotiations. She watched him assess, decide, and execute with the same methodical efficiency she used to analyze market conditions. The difference was that his mistakes would cost lives rather than money. More striking than his physical capabilities was his immediate return to normal behavior afterward. While other passengers remained in shock, while police and paramedics swarmed the scene, Julian calmly helped his daughter with her drawing, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Alessandra found herself studying him with the same analytical intensity she brought to potential business acquisitions. Everything about Julian suggested deliberate understatement: his worn flannel shirt, his modest watch, his careful deflection of attention from himself. But his actions revealed capabilities that were anything but ordinary. During the police interviews that followed, Alessandra provided her statement while observing Julian's interaction with law enforcement. He answered questions with polite cooperation, but minimal detail, focusing attention on the hijacker's actions rather than his own response. When pressed for specifics about his background, he simply said he had some military training and preferred not to elaborate. The phrase struck Alessandra as significant. In her experience, people who described advanced expertise as some training were usually the most skilled practitioners. It was the confident humility of someone who had nothing to prove because their competence spoke for itself. As the bus resumed its journey toward Denver International Airport, now with police escort, Alessandra found herself unable to concentrate on work. Her usual analytical focus kept drifting to the man in row 7, to the questions raised by what she had witnessed. Julian Marroway was clearly not what he appeared to be. But more intriguingly, he seemed determined to appear ordinary, despite possessing extraordinary capabilities. That contradiction suggested a story, possibly a tragic one, that had led someone with elite training to choose deliberate obscurity. Alessandra understood strategic choices. She had built her career by identifying opportunities others missed, by recognizing value where others saw only surface appearances. Her instincts told her there was significant value in understanding Julian's story, though she wasn't yet sure why that understanding might matter. When they finally reached Denver International Airport, Alessandra made an impulsive decision that surprised her with its spontaneity. Instead of proceeding directly to her Phoenix flight, she approached Julian as he gathered his and Emma's belongings. "Excuse me," she said, extending her business card with the automatic professionalism that had become second nature. "I'm Alessandra Corin, of Meridian Industries. I wanted to thank you for what you did today." Julian glanced at the card, but didn't take it, his focus remaining primarily on Emma. "Just glad everyone's safe," he replied politely but dismissively. Emma looked up at Alessandra with bright, curious eyes. "Are you famous?" she asked with the direct honesty of childhood. Alessandra smiled, one of the first genuine expressions she had made all day. "Not really, I just run a computer company." "Daddy's really good with computers too," Emma announced proudly. "He fixes everything." Something in Julian's expression tightened almost imperceptibly at his daughter's words. Alessandra's pattern recognition skills noted the reaction, adding another data point to her growing analysis of this enigmatic man. "Well," she said, tucking her business card back into her jacket pocket, "if you're ever interested in discussing computer work, I'd be happy to talk." Julian's response was polite but final. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm happy with my current situation." As they parted ways in the terminal, Julian and Emma heading to ground transportation, Alessandra proceeding to her delayed Phoenix flight, she found herself thinking about their brief interaction with unusual intensity. Alessandra Corin was accustomed to getting what she wanted through persistence, analysis, and superior resources. But Julian Marroway had dismissed her interest with effortless confidence, showing no awareness of her concern for her wealth and influence. In her world, almost everyone wanted something from her: investment, partnership, employment, access to her network. Julian seemed to want nothing except to protect his daughter and maintain his deliberately ordinary life. That night, in her Phoenix hotel suite, Alessandra found herself researching Julian Merroway instead of preparing for her board presentation. Public records showed basic information. IT specialist, single father, resident of Aurora, Colorado for 3 years. But the details that usually revealed personal history, previous employment, education, family background were remarkably sparse. For someone accustomed to comprehensive due diligence, Julian's minimal digital footprint was itself significant information. People didn't accidentally maintain such privacy in the internet age. It required deliberate effort and specific knowledge of how to avoid digital tracking, combined with his combat capabilities and careful deflection of personal questions. The pattern suggested someone who had intentionally constructed a new identity. While leaving his past behind, Alessandra closed her laptop and stared out at the Phoenix skyline, thinking about the contrast between Julian's apparent ordinariness and hidden capabilities. She had spent her entire adult life building success by leveraging every advantage, pursuing every opportunity, never settling for less than maximum achievement. Julian appeared to have chosen the opposite path, deliberately limiting his opportunities, hiding his capabilities, choosing simplicity over advancement. The question that kept her awake that night was simple but profound. What could motivate someone with Julian's obvious talents to choose such deliberate obscurity? And why did she care so much about finding the answer? The media attention following the hijacking incident was immediate and intense. By the time Julian and Emma reached their Aurora apartment that evening, news vans lined their street and reporters shouted questions from behind police barriers that had been hastily erected to protect their privacy. Mr. Merroway, can you tell us about your military background? How did you learn those fighting techniques? Were you part of special forces? Julian shielded Emma from the chaos, carrying her through their apartment building's side entrance while she buried her face against his shoulder. The building's elderly superintendent, Mrs. Kowalski, met them at the elevator with a sympathetic expression and a plate of homemade cookies. I told those reporters nothing, she announced firmly in her thick Polish accent. Said I never heard of any Julian Merroway. They want to camp out there. They can freeze their behinds off for all I care. Thank you, Mrs. Kowalski, Julian said gratefully, accepting the cookies. I'm sorry about the disruption, she waved dismissively. You saved people's lives. These vultures want to make money from your good deed. They can kiss my babushka. Inside their modest 2-bedroom apartment, Julian immediately closed all the blinds and checked their door locks while Emma settled at the dining table with her homework, seemingly unaffected by the media circus outside. Daddy, why are all those people here? She asked, opening her math workbook. Julian sat beside her, considering his response carefully. Sometimes when someone helps other people, news reporters want to tell that story. But they don't always tell it the right way, so it's better if we don't talk to them. Emma nodded with the trusting acceptance of childhood and returned to her multiplication problems. Julian helped her with the math while monitoring the situation outside through a gap in the living room blinds. The reporters seemed prepared to wait, their equipment suggesting they planned an extended vigil. His phone rang constantly unknown numbers that he let go to voicemail, each message from a different news organization requesting interviews. The few messages he actually listened to all followed the same pattern. Dramatic language about heroism, requests for exclusive interviews, and promises of significant compensation for his story. Julian deleted them all. At 8:47 p.m., after Emma was in bed, his phone rang with a number he recognized, his former commanding officer, Captain Rodriguez, calling from Norfolk Naval Station. Julian, I just saw the news reports. Hell of a thing you did on that bus. Rodriguez, Julian replied, stepping onto his small balcony where the conversation wouldn't wake Emma. How are you? better question is, how are you? Media's calling. You a hero, but they're also digging into your background. Some reporter from Channel 7 called the base looking for information about your service record. Julian felt his stomach tighten. What did they find? Nothing yet, your file's locked down tight. But you know how these things go. They'll keep digging, and eventually someone will talk off the record. You might want to consider getting ahead of the story. Julian watched a news van adjust its satellite equipment, preparing for what appeared to be a long-term surveillance operation. I don't want a story, Rodriguez. I want this to go away. Not going to happen, brother. You took down 3 armed hijackers in front of 30 witnesses, including some very wealthy and influential people. This isn't the kind of thing that just disappears. Through the sliding glass door, Julian could see Emma's artwork on the refrigerator, her stuffed animals arranged on the couch, the careful normalcy he had constructed over 3 years of deliberate obscurity. The media attention threatened all of it. Any advice? He asked. Controlled release, Rodriguez replied immediately. Give them something, but control the narrative. Talk about being a father, about protecting innocent people, about moving on with your life. Don't let them create their own story about you. After ending the call, Julian stood on his balcony for several minutes, analyzing the situation with tactical thinking he rarely applied to civilian problems. The media attention was a threat to his carefully constructed life, but it was also inevitable. The question was whether to engage defensively or allow others to control the information flow. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Mr. Marroway, this is Alessandra Corin from the bus. I understand you're dealing with media attention. If you'd like to discuss managing this situation, I have experience with public relations challenges. My private number is 3035-557-892. No obligation to respond. Julian stared at the message for several minutes. Alessandra Corin, the CEO who had tried to give him her business card, was offering assistance with the one problem he felt least equipped to handle. Her timing was either coincidentally perfect or strategically calculated. He deleted the message without responding. The next morning brought no relief from the media circus. If anything, the crowd of reporters had grown overnight, now including national news networks and what appeared to be a documentary crew. Julian's usual route to Emma's school was completely blocked. Mrs. Kowalski, he called through their elderly neighbor's door. Would you be willing to walk Emma to school today? I'll pay you for your time. The door opened immediately. You don't pay me nothing for helping that sweet girl, Mrs. Kowalski declared, already putting on her coat. These reporters don't bother old Polish lady. I tell them I'm deaf if they ask questions. Julian knelt to Emma's level as she prepared for the unusual departure routine. Mrs. Kowalski is going to walk you to school today, okay? I'll pick you up this afternoon like normal. Emma looked concerned for the first time since the incident. Are you in trouble, Daddy? No, sweetheart. Just dealing with some adult stuff that's temporary. Everything's going to be fine. After Emma and Mrs. Kowalski left through the building's service entrance, Julian called his supervisor at Integrated Solutions. Julian, thank God you called, Rebecca Martinez said before he could speak. We've had reporters calling all morning, asking about you. I told them we don't discuss employees, but they're persistent. I can work from home for a few days until this dies down, Julian offered. Actually, that might be best. Some of our clients are nervous about the attention. Nothing personal, but you know how corporate types get about publicity they can't control. Julian understood. His presence at the office would create complications for a company that preferred to avoid any form of media attention. I'll handle the Brennan Industries server upgrade remotely. Should be able to maintain normal productivity. After organizing his remote work situation, Julian spent the day researching crisis management and public relations strategies. His military training had included media awareness, but only in the context of avoiding attention, not managing unwanted publicity. Most of the advice he found online seemed designed for people who wanted fame, not for those trying to escape it. The recommendations all involved engaging with media, telling his story, leveraging the attention for personal or professional gain. Julian wanted the opposite of everything he was reading. His phone rang at 2:15 p.m. Thornfield Elementary School. Emma's principal calling. "Mr. Marroway, this is Dr. Williams. I'm afraid we have a situation. Several reporters have been trying to access our school grounds, claiming they want to interview Emma about yesterday's incident." Julian's protective instincts flared immediately. "Is she safe?" "Absolutely. We've increased security and the reporters are being kept off school property. But Emma is aware of the commotion and it's affecting her concentration. She asked to call you." "Put her on," Julian said immediately. Emma's small voice came through the phone, wavering with uncertainty. "Daddy, there are people with cameras at school asking about me. I don't like it." Julian's chest tightened with anger at the reporters who would frighten an 8-year-old for their story. "Emma, listen to me carefully. Those people can't come into your school, and they can't talk to you without my permission. You're completely safe. Mrs. Rodriguez and Dr. Williams won't let anyone bother you. When will they go away?" It was the same question Julian had been asking himself. "Soon, sweetheart. People will get interested in other stories, and they'll forget about us. Until then, we're just going to be extra careful and stick together. Can I come home now?" Julian wanted nothing more than to collect Emma immediately and protect her from all of this unwanted attention. But running would only make the story bigger, more intriguing to the media. "Dr. Williams is going to walk you to Mrs. Kowalski when school ends, just like this morning. I'll be waiting for you at home, okay?" After hanging up, Julian made a decision that went against every instinct he had developed over 3 years of careful anonymity. He retrieved Alessandra Corin's text message and called her private number. She answered on the second ring. "Alessandra Corin, Ms. Corin, this is Julian Marroway. From the bus yesterday." Julian, her voice immediately warmed with what sounded like genuine concern. "I'm glad you called. How are you handling the media attention?" "Not well, Julian. Admitted. They're frightening my daughter, and I don't have experience with this kind of situation." Alessandra's response was immediate and decisive. "I can help with that. Are you available to meet this afternoon? I can come to you, or we can meet somewhere private." Julian glanced toward his windows, where he could see camera equipment being adjusted for better angles. "Anywhere but here. The reporters have my building surrounded. I'll send a car to collect you from your building's service entrance in 20 minutes. The driver will know where to go. Miss Corin, I should mention that I can't afford professional public relations services." Alessandra's laugh was genuinely amused. "Julian, after what you did yesterday, I think I can spare a few hours of free advice." 22 minutes later, Julian slipped out through the building's loading dock area and into a discreet black sedan that looked expensive but unremarkable. The driver, a professional security specialist who introduced himself only as Mike, navigated through Aurora's residential streets with the skill of someone trained in evasive driving. "Miss Corin thought you might prefer somewhere private and secure," Mike explained. "We're going to her personal residence in Cherry Creek. No reporters, no publicity, just quiet conversation." Alessandra's penthouse apartment was nothing like Julian had expected. While clearly expensive, it was also understated and comfortable, with warm lighting and personal touches that suggested actual residence rather than showpiece decor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular views of downtown Denver and the mountains beyond. Alessandra met him at the door, dressed casually in dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater, looking more approachable than the business executive he remembered from the bus. "Thank you for coming," she said, leading him to a comfortable seating area near the windows. "I imagine this is all pretty overwhelming." Julian sat across from her, struck by how different she seemed in her personal space. The calculating intensity he had observed on the bus was still present, but tempered by something that felt like genuine warmth. "I've never dealt with anything like this," he admitted. "In my previous work, the goal was always to avoid attention, not manage it." Alessandra leaned forward slightly, her expression attentive. "Your previous work was military, I'm assuming? The way you moved yesterday, your situational awareness, that was professional training." Julian hesitated, unused to direct questions about his background. But Alessandra had witnessed his capabilities firsthand, and her offer of help seemed genuine. "Navy SEAL Team 6, he said simply. 12 years. I left the service after my wife died." Alessandra nodded without surprise, as if the information confirmed her analysis rather than revealing something unexpected. "And now you work in IT support while raising your daughter." "That's right. That's quite a career change." Julian's expression tightened slightly. Emma needed stability. Needed a father who would be present instead of deployed. Alessandra studied his face carefully, and Julian had the distinct impression he was being evaluated with the same analytical intensity she might apply to a business decision. "The reporters are treating this like a hero story," she said finally. "Former Special Forces operator saves passengers from hijacking. They want drama, military details, the kind of narrative that sells advertising." "That's exactly what I want to avoid," Julian replied. "Emma and I have a quiet life. We don't need or want publicity. Unfortunately, what you want isn't really relevant anymore. The story exists whether you participate or not. The question is whether you help shape it, or let others create it for you." Julian considered her words carefully. In military operations, intelligence gathering and narrative control were critical strategic elements. Allowing the enemy to control information flow was usually a recipe for mission failure. "What do you recommend?" Alessandra smiled, the first fully genuine expression he had seen from her. "Controlled engagement. One interview, carefully managed, that gives them enough information to satisfy curiosity while protecting what you want to keep private. Will that actually make them go away? It will reduce their interest significantly. Right now you're a mystery, and mysteries are compelling. Answer their basic questions about who you are and what you did. Emphasize your desire for privacy and normal life with your daughter, and most of them will move on to more exciting stories." Julian weighed her advice against his instinctive desire to maintain complete anonymity. The media attention was already affecting Emma, and his current strategy of avoidance wasn't working. "You have experience with this kind of situation?" Alessandra's laugh was slightly rueful. "Running a major corporation means occasional unwanted media attention. I've learned how to manage information flow to protect what matters most." "And what would you want in return for helping me?" The directness of the question seemed to surprise her. "Nothing," she said after a moment. "You saved my life yesterday, along with 31 other people. I'd like to help you protect the life you've built for your daughter." Julian studied her face, applying the same threat assessment skills he used to evaluate potential dangers. But Alessandra Corrine didn't seem to represent a threat, at least not the kind he was trained to recognize. "All right," he said finally. "What do we do first?" Alessandra reached for her phone with the decisive movement of someone accustomed to taking immediate action once decisions were made. "First, we control the narrative before someone else does." The interview strategy Alessandra designed was masterful in its simplicity. Rather than avoiding the media entirely, she arranged for Julian to speak with Rebecca Chun, a respected journalist from Colorado Public Radio known for thoughtful, non-sensationalized reporting. "Local media first," Alessandra explained as they prepared in her apartment's comfortable study. "Rebecca specializes in human interest stories, not sensational drama. She'll focus on your transition to civilian life, and your priorities as a single father. Julian sat across from her at a polished conference table, reviewing the talking points she had prepared. You've put a lot of thought into this. Managing information is part of my job, Alessandra replied, but there was something warmer in her tone than professional courtesy. Besides, Emma deserves to have her father's privacy protected. The mention of his daughter's name in Alessandra's careful planning struck Julian as significant. She hadn't just analyzed the situation as a business problem, she had considered Emma's well-being as a primary factor. The radio interview took place the following afternoon in Alessandra's office at Meridian Industries, a neutral location that reinforced Julian's desire to return to normal life. Rebecca Chun proved to be exactly as advertised: professional, empathetic, and focused on the human elements of the story rather than dramatic details. What I want people to understand, Julian said during the interview, is that I'm just a father who happened to have training that was useful in an emergency. My priority now is providing Emma with stability and normalcy. We're grateful everyone on that bus is safe, but we'd like to return to our quiet life. The interview worked perfectly. Within 2 days, the media circus outside Julian's apartment had largely dispersed, moving on to more cooperative subjects and fresher stories. Julian could walk Emma to school again without navigating camera crews. It worked, he told Alessandra when he called to thank her. Emma asked this morning why all the people with cameras went away. I told her they found other stories to tell. I'm glad, Alessandra replied, and Julian detected genuine relief in her voice. How is she adjusting? The question surprised him. With its personal nature, most people asked about his own experience or the dramatic aspects of the incident. Alessandra consistently focused on Emma's well-being. She's resilient, Julian said. Draws pictures about everything that happens to her, which helps her process experiences. She's been drawing horses wearing superhero capes lately. Alessandra laughed, a genuine sound that was becoming familiar to him. That sounds like a very healthy way to interpret recent events. Their conversations began extending beyond the immediate crisis management. Alessandra would call to check on Emma's adjustment, and Julian found himself asking about Alessandra's work challenges. They discovered an unexpected compatibility in their approaches to problem solving, both analytical, both focused on practical solutions, both protective of the people they cared about. You know, Alessandra said during one of their calls, Meridian Industries has an excellent childcare facility. If you're ever interested in changing jobs, our IT security division could use someone with your background. Julian paused, considering the offer. That's generous, but I'm happy where I am. Emma's school is in walking distance. My hours are predictable, and we have a good routine. Of course, Alessandra replied quickly. I didn't mean to suggest you should change what's working for your family. But the offer had been made, and both of them recognized it as something more than professional recruitment. 2 weeks after the media attention died down, Alessandra suggested meeting for coffee, ostensibly to discuss follow-up strategies for maintaining privacy, but really because they had both begun to value their conversations. They met at a small cafe in downtown Denver, neutral territory that felt comfortable for both of them. Julian arrived first, choosing a table with clear sight lines to all exits, a habit he couldn't break even in civilian settings. You always sit where you can see everything, Alessandra observed as she joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Occupational hazard, Julian replied with a slight smile. Some training never fully goes away. Alessandra studied his face thoughtfully. Do you miss it? The military life, I mean. Julian considered the question seriously. I miss the sense of purpose, the feeling that my work mattered on a larger scale. But I wouldn't trade what I have now for anything. Emma is my purpose now. That must have been a difficult transition, Alessandra said gently. The hardest part was learning to find fulfillment in smaller victories, Julian admitted. Helping Emma with homework doesn't feel as significant as leading rescue operations, but it's more important for the person who matters most to me. Alessandra nodded with what looked like recognition rather than sympathy. I understand that conflict between professional achievement and personal priorities. Do you have children? Julian asked. No, Alessandra replied, her tone becoming more guarded. My career hasn't left much room for family life. Julian sensed there was more to that story, but he didn't press. They were still learning to navigate personal conversations, still establishing the boundaries of their developing friendship. As they talked, Julian found himself genuinely enjoying Alessandra's company. She was intelligent without being condescending, successful without being arrogant, and she asked thoughtful questions about his experiences with Emma that showed real interest in understanding his priorities. Emma would like you, he said as they prepared to leave. She's always asking why I don't have friends like the other parents. Alessandra smiled with what looked like genuine pleasure. I'd like to meet her properly sometime, under better circumstances than a hijacking. She'd like that too, Julian replied, surprised by how much he meant it. The opportunity for Alessandra to meet Emma came sooner than expected. Julian's usual babysitter canceled last minute on a Saturday when he had committed to volunteer IT support for a local nonprofit's fundraising event. Desperate, he called Alessandra, who immediately offered to help. I don't have experience with children, Alessandra warned as she arrived at Julian's apartment. My interaction with anyone under 18 is pretty limited. Emma appeared from her bedroom carrying her drawing tablet and immediately studied Alessandra with the frank curiosity of childhood. You're really tall, she announced. And you have pretty shoes. Alessandra looked down at her designer heels, clearly unused to having her appearance evaluated by an 8-year-old. Thank you. I like your horse drawings your father showed me some pictures. Do you want to see my collection? Emma asked eagerly. I have figurines and books and drawings, and even a blanket with horses on it. Julian watched with amusement as Emma led Alessandra on a comprehensive tour of her horse-themed possessions, explaining the story behind each item with the detailed enthusiasm that only children could sustain. This one is Starlight, Emma said, holding up a small plastic horse. She's the leader of the herd because she's the bravest. And this is Thunder. He's fast, but sometimes he makes bad decisions because he doesn't think first. Alessandra listened with surprising patience, asking follow-up questions that showed she was actually paying attention rather than simply being polite. Your father mentioned you draw pictures about things that happened to you, Alessandra said. That sounds like a good way to remember important moments. Emma nodded seriously. Daddy says art helps us understand our feelings. Want to see the picture I drew about the bus? The bus? Before Julian could intervene, Emma had retrieved a drawing that showed stick figures on a bus, with one figure clearly meant to be Julian standing protectively in front of the others. The drawing was surprisingly sophisticated for a child's work, capturing the basic dynamics of the incident without focusing on violence. This is very good, Alessandra said, studying the drawing carefully. You captured the most important part, that your father was protecting everyone. Daddy's job is to keep people safe, Emma replied matter-of-factly. He kept me safe when Mommy went to heaven, and he keeps other people safe too. Julian felt his throat tighten at Emma's casual reference to her mother's death. Even 3 years later, her straightforward acceptance of loss could catch him off guard. Alessandra glanced at Julian with understanding in her eyes. Your father is very good at taking care of the people he loves. After Emma went to bed that evening, Julian and Alessandra sat in his small living room, sharing coffee and processing the evening's interactions. She's remarkable, Alessandra. Solid, so emotionally mature for her age. She had to grow up faster than I wanted, Julian replied quietly. Losing her mother when she was 5, she learned early that life can change suddenly. Alessandra studied his face carefully. What was your wife like? Julian was quiet for a moment, considering how to answer. He rarely talked about Sarah with anyone, but something about Alessandra's genuine interest made the conversation feel safe. Sarah was a teacher, he said finally. Elementary school, like Emma attends now. She was patient, creative, had this ability to see potential in everyone. She made me want to be better than I thought I could be. She sounds wonderful. She was supposed to have decades to influence children's lives, to raise Emma, to grow old with me. Instead, she got 31 years and an undiagnosed heart condition. Julian's voice carried old grief, but not bitterness. Alessandra reached across the small space between them and touched his hand briefly, a gesture of comfort that felt natural rather than intrusive. "Emma's lucky to have you," she said softly. Not everyone would have given up their entire career to be present for their child. Julian looked at her seriously. "What about you? Have you ever considered having a family?" Alessandra's expression became more guarded, but she didn't deflect the question entirely. "I always assumed I would someday. But I became so focused on building the company, on proving myself in a male-dominated industry, that personal relationships became secondary priorities. And now? Now I'm 34, working 70-hour weeks, and I can't remember the last time I had a conversation that wasn't about business until I met you and Emma." She paused, seeming to consider how much to reveal. "My parents built successful careers by sacrificing everything personal. I swore I'd be different, but I became exactly like them." Julian recognized the regret in her voice, the same questioning he had experienced when choosing between military advancement and Emma's needs. "It's not too late to make different choices," he said gently. Alessandra smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "Maybe, but some opportunities don't wait for us to figure out our priorities." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both processing the personal revelations they had shared. "Thank you for helping with Emma tonight," Julian said finally. "She obviously enjoyed spending time with you." "So did I," Alessandra replied with obvious sincerity. "I'd like to do it again, if you'd be comfortable with that." Julian studied her face, recognizing something in her expression that went beyond friendship or even attraction, a longing for connection that matched his own carefully hidden desires for companionship. "Emma would love that," he said. And so, with the first, the misunderstanding began with a newspaper article that Julian never saw coming. 3 weeks after the radio interview, the Denver Business Journal published a feature story about Alessandra's leadership at Meridian Industries. The piece was largely positive, focusing on her strategic vision and company growth, but it included a paragraph that changed everything between them. Julian discovered it when his coworker, Rebecca Martinez, approached his desk with a knowing smile and a folded newspaper. "Julian, you didn't tell me you were dating the Alessandra Corinne," she said, spreading the paper across his keyboard. "Look at this." The paragraph that caught Rebecca's attention was buried in the middle of the article. "Corinne has recently been spotted around Denver with Julian Marroway, the former Navy SEAL who made headlines last month for stopping a violent bus hijacking. Sources close to the CEO suggest the relationship represents a departure from her typically work-focused lifestyle." Julian stared at the words, feeling a familiar knot of anxiety in his stomach. Sources close to the CEO could only mean someone in Alessandra's professional circle had been discussing their friendship with reporters. "We're not dating," Julian said firmly. "She helped me handle the media attention after the bus incident. We're friends." Rebecca's expression suggested she didn't entirely believe him. "Julian, she's worth about $200 million. If you're just friends with someone like that, you might want to reconsider your definition of friendship." The implication stung more than Julian expected. He had never considered Alessandra's wealth as a factor in their relationship, but Rebecca's comment made him realize how their friendship might appear to outsiders, and potentially to Alessandra herself. That evening, after putting Emma to bed, Julian called Alessandra's private number. She answered quickly, as she always did. "Julian, I'm so sorry about that article," she said before he could speak. "I had no idea anyone was paying attention to our meetings. My publicist thinks someone from the office may have mentioned seeing us together." Her immediate apology only deepened Julian's discomfort. The fact that she had a publicist, that their friendship was significant enough to warrant media coverage, that she existed in a world where casual relationships became news stories, all of it reinforced the vast differences between their lives. "Alessandra, I need to ask you something directly," Julian said, keeping his voice carefully neutral. "What exactly do you think is happening between us?" The question clearly caught her off guard. "I'm not sure what you mean. The article suggests we're dating. Your publicist is managing the story. People in your office are discussing our relationship with reporters. This feels like something more complicated than friendship." Alessandra was quiet for several seconds before responding. "Julian, I value our friendship enormously. If I've somehow given you the impression that I expect something more, that's not what I'm asking." Julian interrupted, his frustration evident. "I'm asking if you've been thinking of me as some kind of project or charity case. The poor single father who needs the help of the successful CEO. How can you even ask that?" Alessandra's voice carried genuine hurt. "Everything I've done has been because I care about you and Emma, not because I see you as a project." "Then why does it feel like you're managing me the same way you manage the media crisis?" Julian asked. "Job offers, childcare suggestions, introducing me to your world. It feels like you're trying to fix my life according to your standards of success." The accusation hung between them, harsh and unexpected. Julian immediately regretted the words, but they had revealed something he hadn't fully acknowledged even to himself: his discomfort with the inequality between them, his fear that her interest in him was motivated by pity rather than genuine connection. "Is that really what you think?" Alessandra's voice was quiet now, controlled in a way that suggested she was hurt, but trying not to show it. Julian closed his eyes, recognizing that he had allowed his own insecurities to create a conflict that didn't need to exist. "I don't know what I think anymore. This article makes it clear that we live in completely different worlds. Maybe it's better if we acknowledge that before Emma gets too attached." "Emma's already attached," Alessandra replied with quiet honesty. "And so am I." The simple admission stopped Julian's defensive momentum entirely. He had been so focused on protecting himself and Emma from potential disappointment that he hadn't considered Alessandra might be equally invested in their relationship. "Alessandra," he began. "No, Julian, you're right about one thing," she interrupted. "We do live in different worlds. But I thought we had found something that transcended those differences. I thought what we had was real." After she hung up, Julian sat in his quiet apartment, staring at the newspaper article and questioning everything he thought he understood about their relationship. Had he been so defensive about maintaining his independence that he had misinterpreted genuine care as condescension? Had his own fears of inadequacy created problems that didn't actually exist? The next morning, Emma asked why Alessandra hadn't called to check on her art project, as had become her routine. Julian realized he had potentially destroyed something valuable, not just for himself, but for his daughter, who had begun to see Alessandra as an important presence in their lives. For the first time since leaving the military, Julian wondered if his protective instincts had actually caused more harm than the threats he was trying to avoid. The call came at 2:43 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon while Julian was troubleshooting network security issues for a client. Emma's school appeared on his caller ID, immediately triggering the parental alarm system that never fully turned off. "Mr. Marroway, this is Dr. Williams." The principal's voice was tight with controlled urgency. "We have a situation. A man claiming to be Emma's uncle tried to pick her up from school about 20 minutes ago." When we asked for identification and called to verify with you, he became agitated and left quickly. Julian's blood turned cold. Emma had no uncle. Sarah had been an only child, and Julian's only brother had died in Afghanistan years before Emma was born. This was either a case of mistaken identity or something far more dangerous. Is Emma safe? Julian asked, already gathering his keys and heading for the exit. She's secure in my office right now, but Mr. Marroway, there's more. The man had detailed information about Emma, her teacher's name, her favorite subjects, even that she draws horses. This wasn't random. Julian's mind shifted immediately into tactical assessment mode. Someone had been watching them, gathering intelligence on Emma's routine and personal details. The media attention from the hijacking incident had made them visible, and now someone was exploiting that exposure. I'm on my way, Julian said. Lock down the school. Don't let Emma out of your sight until I get there. As Julian drove toward Thornfield Elementary, his phone rang with an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. Julian Marroway. The voice was electronically distorted, clearly using voice modulation software. You cost some people a lot of money and credibility when you interfered with their business on that bus. Julian pulled over immediately, recognizing a direct threat. What do you want? What we want is compensation for our losses. Your little heroic act put 3 of our associates in prison and ruined a carefully planned operation. We think you owe us. This is about the hijacking? Smart man. Here's how this works. You deliver $50,000 to the location we specify, or your daughter's afternoon routine becomes very different. We know she walks home from school every day at 3:05. We know she stops at the corner market for chocolate milk on Fridays. We know everything about her schedule. Julian's protective rage was immediate and overwhelming, but his training kept his voice controlled. You don't want to threaten my daughter. No threats, just facts. You have 2 hours to arrange the money. We'll call back with instructions. The line went dead. Julian sat in his truck, analyzing the situation with the tactical mindset he hadn't fully accessed since leaving the military. These weren't random criminals. They were organized, had conducted surveillance, and were using Emma as leverage because they understood she was his primary vulnerability. But they had made a critical error in their assessment. They saw Julian as a retired soldier trying to live a quiet civilian life. They didn't understand that threatening Emma activated capabilities they weren't prepared to handle. Julian's first call was to Detective Morrison, the officer who had handled the original hijacking case. His second call was to his former commander, Captain Rodriguez, who could provide resources that civilian law enforcement couldn't access quickly enough. That his third call surprised him. He dialed Alessandra's number. Julian? She answered immediately, and he could hear genuine concern in her voice despite their recent argument. Alessandra, I need your help. Someone's threatening Emma because of the hijacking incident. They want money, and they know her school routine. Where are you? Alessandra's response was immediate and decisive, heading to her school. The police are involved, but these people have been watching us. They know too much about our lives. I'm coming. Don't argue with me about this. Julian, Emma matters to me too. 30 minutes later, Alessandra arrived at Thornfield Elementary in a black SUV with tinted windows, accompanied by 2 professional security specialists from Meridian Industries. She approached Julian in the school parking lot with the focused intensity he remembered from their first meeting. What do we know? She asked without preamble. Julian briefed her on the threat, the timeline, and his assessment of the situation. Alessandra listened with the analytical attention she brought to corporate crises, asking pointed questions that revealed both strategic thinking and genuine concern for Emma's safety. They want you to deliver money alone, she summarized. Classic isolation tactic. They're planning to eliminate the threat you represent while collecting compensation. Julian nodded grimly. They made one mistake, though. They threatened the wrong person's daughter. Alessandra studied his face, recognizing something in his expression that she had only glimpsed during the bus incident. "What are you going to?" "Do what I was trained to do," Julian replied quietly. "But first, I need to know Emma's safe. That's where you come in." For the next hour, Julian coordinated with law enforcement and his former military contacts, while Alessandra organized a security detail that would protect Emma regardless of what happened with the money drop. When the criminals called back with instructions, Julian was ready. "The Riverside Industrial District, Warehouse 47, 1 hour," the distorted voice instructed. "Come alone, or the girl's safety becomes uncertain." Julian looked at Alessandra, who nodded with understanding. "Emma will be safe," she promised. "Do what you need to do." As Julian prepared to leave for what might be a confrontation that would end very badly for people who thought they could threaten his daughter, he realized something important. Alessandra had shown up without hesitation when Emma was in danger, despite their recent argument. She had mobilized resources, asked the right questions, and focused entirely on protecting what mattered most to him, their personal misunderstandings seemed insignificant compared to this moment of crisis, when both of them were united in the single priority that truly mattered: keeping Emma safe. The confrontation at Warehouse 47 lasted exactly 8 minutes. Julian arrived to find 3 men waiting with the confidence of people who believed they held all the advantages. They had planned to take his money and eliminate the threat he represented to their criminal organization. They had not planned for someone with Julian's specific training and absolute motivation. When Detective Morrison and his team arrived at the warehouse, they found 3 suspects zip-tied and unconscious, with Julian calmly waiting beside them. The money had never left his truck. The threat to Emma had been permanently neutralized. "Just like the bus," Morrison observed, surveying the scene with professional admiration. "Quick, clean, no casualties except the bad guys." Julian's response was simple: "They threatened my daughter." By the time Julian returned to Thornfield Elementary, Emma was safely in Alessandra's care, working on homework in Dr. Williams' office, while Meridian Industries security specialists maintained discreet watch outside. Emma looked up when Julian entered, her face brightening with relief. "Daddy, Alessandra said you had to go help some people, but that you'd come back soon." Julian knelt to Emma's level, studying her face carefully. "Are you okay, sweetheart? This was a scary day." Emma nodded seriously. "But Alessandra stayed with me the whole time. She helped me with my math homework and said we could get ice cream after you came back." Julian looked at Alessandra, who was watching their reunion with an expression he hadn't seen before, something deeper than concern, more personal than friendship. Later that evening, after Emma was safely home and settling into her bedtime routine, Alessandra sat at Julian's small dining table while he made coffee with hands that were finally steady. "The men who threatened Emma, they won't be bothering anyone for a very long time," Julian said quietly. Alessandra nodded. Detective Morrison called to confirm, "It's over." They sat in silence for several minutes, processing the day's events and what they revealed about their priorities and feelings for each other. "Julian," Alessandra said finally, her voice carrying an emotion he had never heard from her before, "when I got your call today about Emma being in danger, I realized something that scared me more than any business crisis I've ever faced." Julian looked at her questioningly. "I realized that I love that little girl like she was my own daughter," Alessandra continued, her composed executive demeanor cracking to reveal something raw and vulnerable. "And I love you in a way that has nothing to do with your heroic capabilities, or tragic backstory, or any of the dramatic circumstances that brought us together." Julian felt his chest tighten with recognition of the truth he had been afraid to acknowledge. "I love your quiet morning routines with Emma." Alessandra's voice was barely above a whisper now. "I love that you cut her apples into perfect sections. and that you listened to every detail of her day like it's the most important intelligence briefing you've ever received. I love that you gave up everything you had built professionally because being her father mattered more than being a hero. Tears were flowing down Alessandra's face now, the first time Julian had seen her lose her careful emotional control. I spent my whole adult life building something I thought would matter, she continued. But today, when Emma was in danger, I realized that the most important thing in my world is a family that isn't even mine. And I don't know how to ask if there might be room for someone like me in the life you've built for her. Julian reached across the table and took her hands in his, finally understanding that her wealth and success had never been barriers to their connection. Only his own fears had created those obstacles. Emma asked me tonight why you were crying when you thought she wasn't looking, Julian said softly. I told her it was because you care about us very much. She said that made sense, because people cry when they love someone. Alessandra smiled through her tears. She's wiser than both of us. 6 months later, Emma's latest drawing showed 3 figures holding hands outside Thornfield Elementary. Her father, herself, and the tall woman with pretty shoes who now helped with homework every evening, and who had taught her that families could grow in unexpected ways. At the bottom of the drawing, in Emma's careful 8-year-old handwriting, were the words, "My family got bigger because Daddy's friend decided to stay." Julian kept the drawing on his desk at Meridian Industries, where he now worked as director of security, finally using his skills in service of something larger than himself while never missing a single moment of Emma's childhood. Quiet family they had built together was proof that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories began with ordinary courage, and that the greatest victories were measured not in headlines or heroic moments, but in the daily choice to show up for the people who mattered most. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.